The rain came down in thin, icy needles, slicing through the glow of Ethan Cole's headlights. Midnight on Interstate 405, that lonely hour when the city seemed to forget itself. The hum of the tires was the only sound left in his life that didn't argue back. Until he saw her. A car sat sideways on the shoulder, hazards blinking like a dying heartbeat. Smoke curled from under its hood. Ethan slowed instinctively. Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, was asleep in the back seat. Her small hands curled around a stuffed fox. He hesitated. Stopping for strangers at night wasn't just reckless. It was stupid. But something in the figure by the guardrail, small, trembling, clutching a faded purse, pulled him in. He rolled down the window. "Ma'am, you okay?" The woman didn't answer. Her silver hair was plastered to her forehead, eyes glassy and unfocused. When Ethan stepped out, the cold bit through his jacket. Gasoline and rain mixed in the air. She whispered something, almost a breath. "Can't find home." Her voice was fragile, like an old record that had been played too many times. He guided her into his truck, turned the heater on, and called 911. The dispatcher asked for her name. The woman paused, confused. I don't remember." Ethan's chest tightened. Alzheimer's? Shock? Either way, she was lost. And now, she was his responsibility. He drove toward the nearest gas station, headlights carving a tunnel through the storm. The woman stared out the window, murmuring names Ethan didn't recognize. Eleanor, Henry, Davenport. He assumed they were family. When he asked for her address, she only shook her head, repeating one sentence over and over. They took everything, everything. By the time they reached the station, the rain had stopped. The clerk called the police. Ethan tried to comfort her with warm coffee, but she barely touched it. Then suddenly she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "You shouldn't have stopped," she said, eyes sharp now, almost lucid. "They'll come for you too." A chill ran through him, and not from the weather. Minutes later, flashing lights painted the parking lot red and blue. Ethan stepped outside to talk to the officers. When he turned back, the seat where she'd been sitting was empty. No trace, no door sound, no footsteps on wet concrete. Just the faint smell of lavender and something metallic. The officers assumed she'd wandered off, but Ethan knew better. The purse she'd left behind held nothing but an old golden locket, engraved with 3 letters, ED. He didn't know it yet, but that small, forgotten locket would drag him into a mystery that would consume everything he loved. As the tow truck took her car away, Ethan stood in the rain again, the empty freeway stretching out before him. Somewhere out there, the woman was gone, and his life had just split into 2. The world before that night, and everything after. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because sometimes one act of kindness hides a story that can change everything. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, painting thin golden bars across Ethan's living room. The locket sat on the table beside a half-empty cup of coffee, gleaming faintly, small, innocent, and impossibly heavy. He hadn't slept. The police report called it an encounter with an unidentified elderly woman. They promised to contact nearby hospitals and care facilities, but Ethan had seen enough cases go cold to know how that story ends. Quietly, without answers. Still, something gnawed at him. The way she'd said his name. "They'll come for you too." She shouldn't have known who he was. He never told her. He turned the locket in his hands. On the back, engraved beneath the ED, was a date, June 12, 1974. When he pried it open, he found a black and white photograph of a young woman standing in front of a mansion. Behind her, the faint outline of a crest on the gates, a lion and 2 letters intertwined. D&C Davenport and Cole Industries. Ethan froze. Cole, his last name. But his branch of the family had never known wealth. His father had worked construction until the day he died. Could there be a connection? Or was it just coincidence? A cruel one? He typed Davenport Family, California into the search bar. The results flooded in. Political donors, real estate empires, a dynasty spanning 3 generations. At the top of every article, one name repeated, Eleanor Davenport. declared missing in 1979 after a boating accident off the Catalina coast. Presumed dead. Ethan stared at the photo again. The young woman's eyes, sharp, determined, familiar. The same shape, the same glint of defiance he'd seen in the woman he'd rescued. A cold realization hit him. Could she be that Eleanor Davenport? If so, how had she survived all these years? And why vanish again? A knock shattered his thoughts. Two men in suits stood outside, their expressions polite but wrong, too polished. "Mr. Cole?" one asked, flashing a badge so quickly Ethan barely caught the logo. "We're following up on a report from last night. May we come in?" Something in his gut screamed no. "Sure," he said anyway. They moved through his home like they already knew every corner. One of them glanced at the locket, then at Ethan. "Where did you get that?" "She left it in my truck." The man's jaw tightened. "That's classified property. We'll take it from here." Ethan hesitated. "She said she didn't remember her name. I just want to know she's safe." The man smiled, but his eyes were ice. "If you know what's best for you and your daughter, Mr. Cole, you'll forget you ever saw her." They left as quickly as they came, tires crunching over the gravel. Ethan stood frozen, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He looked at the table. The locket was gone. But they'd made one mistake. On his phone, before opening the door, Ethan had taken a picture of the locket's engraving. ED, June 12, 1974. He had a lead now, and a reason not to let go. Outside, a black sedan idled at the corner for several minutes before disappearing into traffic. Ethan didn't know it yet, but he had just stepped into a storm that would swallow everything in his path. The next morning, the city felt wrong. Too still, too ordinary for a man who had just been warned to forget. Ethan dropped Lily at school, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. But his mind was racing, retracing every detail of that night on the freeway. The photo of the locket glowed faintly on his phone screen. ED, June 12, 1974. That was his only clue. He searched through online archives, scrolling past headlines filled with smiling faces from decades ago. Charity galas, fundraisers, luxury estates. And then he saw it. Heiress Eleanor Davenport missing at sea, presumed dead. The article was dated June 14, 1979. It showed a young woman with piercing eyes and a confident smile, standing beside her father, business magnate Charles Davenport. The caption mentioned a private yacht, a storm, no bodies recovered. But what truly froze Ethan was the name listed among those questioned during the investigation. Michael Cole, his father. The breath caught in his throat. His dad, the man who'd raised him to believe in honesty and decency and doing the right thing, had been connected to the Davenports. He tried to remember any mention, any hint. There was nothing. That night, Ethan drove to his father's old workshop, a rusted metal building that still smelled of oil and sawdust. In a box labeled Taxes 1979, he found something wedged beneath faded receipts, a letter sealed with wax. The same D&C crest from the locket. Hands trembling, he broke it open. "Michael, if this reaches you, it means they found out. Keep her safe. She knows too much. Don't trust anyone, and especially Charles. ED." The world tilted. His father hadn't been questioned because he was a suspect. He'd been protecting her. Ethan's thoughts tumbled into chaos. His father had died in a construction accident when he was 15. Or so he'd been told. But what if it hadn't been an accident at all? What if it had been a cleanup? He pulled up his dad's death certificate. Fell from scaffolding. No witnesses. Too neat. Too final. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant. A storm was moving in again, as if the past itself were closing in. Then, a sound. Tires on gravel. Ethan peeked through the dusty window. A black sedan parked across the street, the same one from yesterday. A figure sat inside, not moving. Watching. His pulse hammered. He grabbed the letter and the photo and shoved them into his jacket. As he stepped outside, the car's engine roared to life and sped away, taillights vanishing into the fog. Ethan stood there in the rain, drenched and shaking. Everything he thought he knew about his family was unraveling. His father had hidden a woman the world believed was dead. And somehow, decades later, that same woman had found him. He looked down at the letter again, the ink bleeding from the rain. The last line blurred, but one word remained clear. Safe. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. And Ethan Cole, against every instinct, made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He wasn't walking away. Not now. Not ever. The rain returned that night, not as a storm, but as a whisper, soft and relentless against the glass. Ethan sat at his kitchen table surrounded by chaos, printouts, newspaper clippings, the letter from Eleanor Davenport now sealed inside a plastic sleeve. His daughter Lily slept upstairs, unaware that her father's world was starting to fracture along invisible lines. The Davenports weren't just rich. They were untouchable. Politics, real estate, philanthropy. The family's empire stretched across California like a quiet shadow. The more Ethan read, the clearer it became. If Eleanor had once tried to expose them, that would have been enough to erase her. But why had she reappeared now after all these years? He opened his laptop again and typed, Charles Davenport heirs. The first result, Eleanor Davenport, presumed dead. The second, Henry Davenport, CEO, Davenport Holdings. The same name the woman had whispered in his truck. Eleanor. Henry. A knock startled him. Midnight. He checked the peephole. A woman stood outside, early 30s, trench coat soaked, hair clinging to her cheeks. Not police, not corporate. Her eyes looked tired but alert. When he opened the door, she spoke first. You shouldn't be looking into them. Ethan froze. Who are you? My name's Claire. I used to work for the Davenports, accounting division. She stepped inside, lowering her voice. I saw your post online, the photograph of the locket. You shouldn't have shared that. Ethan blinked. I didn't. Then he remembered. Earlier, he'd posted the image to a local missing persons forum, asking if anyone recognized it. Claire pulled out a flash drive. That family launders money through half the city's charities. Eleanor found out. She was going to expose them before her disappearance. When I saw your post, I knew she had to be alive, or someone wanted us to think so. Ethan's heart pounded. She's alive. I helped her on the freeway. She vanished that night. Claire's expression shifted, disbelief mixed with fear. Then they'll come for you next. Before Ethan could reply, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. We warned you. Walk away. He glanced at the window. Across the street, a light blinked. Once. Twice. Someone was watching. Claire looked at him. You have to leave. Tonight. But Ethan's thoughts were already racing toward something darker. What if Eleanor didn't just disappear? What if she hid herself and my father helped her? Claire's voice trembled. If that's true, your father died protecting her, and now you're following the same path. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room for a split second, and in that instant Ethan saw a red laser dot glide across the wall. Down, he shouted, pulling Claire to the floor. The window shattered. A bullet tore through the cabinet behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan crawled toward the front door, scanning the street. The black sedan was gone. Claire gripped his arm. You can't fight them. They have eyes everywhere. Ethan stared out into the rain, jaw set. Then it's time they realize someone's watching them too. Behind him on the floor, the flash drive gleamed faintly under the broken glass. The only proof that what they were chasing wasn't a ghost story. It was a war. The morning after the shooting, the house was a crime scene of silence. Shattered glass sparkled in the sunlight like frost. Ethan swept the fragments into a pile, careful not to wake Lily, who had slept through the chaos, blissfully unaware of how close danger had come. He should have called the police. He didn't. He knew better now. The men in suits, the stolen locket, the message on his phone. The Davenports owned more than property. They owned people. Across the table, Claire sat pale and sleepless, staring at the flash drive she'd nearly died protecting. Everything I have on them is here, she said. Financial ledgers, offshore accounts, shell companies. But without a way to prove who accessed them, it's just noise. Eleanor had the original documents. If she's alive, she still does. Ethan leaned forward. Then we find her. Claire shook her head. She doesn't want to be found. If she contacted your father, she trusted him to keep her hidden. You showing up means something's changed. Ethan glanced at the window, the one with a fresh bullet hole in it. Yeah, it has. They packed what little evidence they had and drove north, away from Los Angeles. Ethan's plan was simple. Find out where Eleanor had gone after her supposed death. His father's letter mentioned Catalina. That was the starting point. As the freeway stretched out ahead, Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time it was a voice message. No number. Just static. Then a whisper. You think you're saving her, Ethan. But she's the one who doomed you. He nearly dropped the phone. Claire's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. They reached the harbor by dusk, fog curling over the water like smoke. Ethan parked near the docks where a weathered fisherman pointed him toward an old maintenance shack. If you're looking for the Davenport wreck, the man said, there's not much left. They closed off the area years ago. Inside the shack, they found rusted equipment and a shelf of forgotten logbooks. Ethan flipped through one from June 1979. Page after page of cargo manifests, until one line stopped him cold. Passenger transfer, E. Davenport, vessel 47B. Status, rerouted. Rerouted. Not sunk. Not lost. Before he could say a word, Claire's phone pinged. A new message appeared, blank except for a live photo. It was a shot of Ethan's daughter, Lily, playing on the schoolyard. The timestamp, 5 minutes ago. The blood drained from Ethan's face. They found her. Claire grabbed his arm. Ethan, listen. If you go back, you'll walk straight into their hands. That's what they want. He was already moving toward the door. I don't care. She's my daughter. Claire tried to stop him, but there was no reasoning with the kind of fear that burns everything else away. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the pier in gray silence. Somewhere out there, his little girl was in danger, and someone wanted him to know exactly how powerless he really was. As Ethan sped toward the mainland, his phone buzzed one last time. A single text flashed on the screen before disappearing into static. Bring the letter, or she disappears like the rest. For the first time, Ethan realized this wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. The city lights blurred through Ethan's windshield as he tore down the Pacific Coast Highway, tires screaming against the wet asphalt. Every thought, every breath, every heartbeat narrowed to one single point. Lily. He didn't know who had her. He didn't know where. All he knew was that whoever sent that message had eyes everywhere, and that the letter from Eleanor was suddenly the most dangerous piece of paper in California. Claire sat in the passenger seat, phone in hand, scanning for any digital trail. They must have used a ghost network, she said. No number, no metadata. These people don't send warnings, Ethan. They send signals. He glanced over. Then what's the signal? She met his eyes. That you're playing their game now. They reached his neighborhood just after midnight. The house looked peaceful from the street, porch light glowing, curtains drawn, but Ethan felt the trap before he saw it. A dark SUV idled half a block away. He parked 2 streets over and crept through the back gate. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air felt wrong. Too still, too cold. Lily's backpack lay on the floor beside the couch. Her favorite stuffed fox, Mr. Buttons, was gone. And on the table, in the same spot where the locket once rested, sat a single photograph. Ethan picked it up with trembling fingers. It showed the elderly woman he'd rescued, Eleanor, standing beside a younger man in a black suit. The man was unmistakable. Charles Davenport. But behind them, blurred in the background, was another face. His father, Michael Cole. Claire gasped softly. That's proof. Your father knew them both. He was in the picture before she disappeared. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, someone had scrawled, "Truth buried is truth reborn. June 12th, 1974. Ethan's mind raced. June 12th, the same date engraved on the locket. That was the day something happened, something big enough to destroy lives and rewrite history. He turned to Claire. If we can find the original negative, maybe we can trace where it was taken. She nodded slowly. And maybe find out what they were hiding that day. Before they could move, headlights swept across the living room. The SUV had pulled up. Doors slammed outside. Ethan shoved the photo and the letter into his jacket and motioned to the back door. Go. They slipped into the night as shadows crossed the porch. From behind the fence, Ethan saw 3 men enter his home. The same 2 agents from before, plus a third, taller one with silver hair. The tall man paused by the table, lifting the picture frame. Still chasing ghosts, he muttered. Just like his father. Then he turned toward the window, looking directly at Ethan's hiding spot. Bring him in alive. We need the letter. Ethan grabbed Claire's wrist, heart pounding. They sprinted down the alley, every echo of their footsteps sounding like a countdown. Behind them, the house erupted in flames, a roaring inferno that lit the sky. The photograph, the memories, the proof, all gone. Except for one thing. Ethan still had the picture's digital copy on his phone. As sirens wailed in the distance, Claire looked at him, her face pale from the firelight. You understand what this means, right? Your father wasn't protecting Eleanor. He was protecting something else. Something bigger. Ethan stared at the burning house, his past reduced to ash, and whispered, Then it's time I find out what he died for. Dawn broke over a scorched horizon. Ethan stood on the side of the highway, smoke still clinging to his clothes. Behind him, the only home his daughter had ever known was a blackened skeleton of ash. Ahead of him lay a question that refused to die. Why had his father died for Eleanor Davenport? And why did the Davenports now want him silenced? He turned to Claire, who sat inside the car, typing furiously on her laptop. What are you doing? He asked. Encrypting the files from the flash drive, she said. We can't trust the cloud. If they find us, this data is all we've got. Ethan's eyes darkened. No. Lily's all I've got. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. Every second wasted felt like oxygen bleeding out of a sealed room. Somewhere his daughter was waiting, scared, alone, and maybe wondering why her father hadn't come yet. Claire looked up from the screen. I might have something. There's a reference in Eleanor's documents to a foundation. The Haven Project. It's registered under an old Davenport subsidiary. And get this, its listed headquarters are in the middle of nowhere, north of Santa Barbara. Ethan started the engine. Then that's where we're going. They reached the countryside by noon, endless fields giving way to steep cliffs and ocean mist. The road ended at a wrought iron gate marked Haven Research Center. The name looked official, but everything about it screamed cover story. Ethan parked behind a ridge and scanned the facility through binoculars. Security cameras rotated in quiet rhythm. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter. Claire frowned. Looks more like a prison than a charity. Ethan's pulse quickened. If Eleanor's alive, this is where they're keeping her. They waited until dusk before making their move. Claire jammed the surveillance loop using a portable transmitter, giving them a 3-minute window. They slipped through the fence, creeping along the side of a concrete building until they reached a service door. Inside, the hallways buzzed with fluorescent light. Every room they passed was empty, until they found one labeled Archive 1974. Ethan pushed the door open. Rows of metal cabinets stretched into the dark, filled with files dating back half a century. Dust hung in the air like old secrets refusing to settle. Claire opened a drawer. Look at this. Inside were photos, articles, internal memos, all referencing a Project Sequoia. Ethan grabbed one file and scanned the first page. Subject Eleanor Davenport. Status whistleblower. Containment priority high. His breath caught. Beneath the header was another name. Michael Cole. Operative assigned. Asset protection and asset disposal if required. Ethan froze. No, that can't be right. But the documents were clear. His father hadn't just helped Eleanor, he'd worked for the Davenports. And disposal didn't sound like protection. Before he could process it, alarms erupted. Red lights flashed, painting the walls with panic. A voice echoed through the hall. Security breach in Archive Sector B, contain immediately. Claire slammed the drawer shut. They know we're here. Ethan grabbed the file and ran. They sprinted down the corridor, the sound of boots pounding behind them. A guard shouted. Bullets ricocheted off the concrete. They burst through a maintenance exit into the cold night air. The ocean wind cut like knives. A black helicopter roared to life on the helipad above. Claire pointed to a dirt road winding down the cliff. That way. They stumbled through the brush, hearts hammering, until they reached the car. Ethan floored the accelerator, gravel spitting under the tires. In the rearview mirror, the facility lights shrank into the distance. Only then did Claire speak, her voice trembling. "Ethan, if your father was one of them, why would Eleanor still reach out to him?" He stared at the road, eyes hollow. Maybe because she knew he wanted out. Maybe he died trying to make it right. He opened the file in his lap. Tucked inside was a faded Polaroid, Eleanor holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. On the back, scrawled in shaky handwriting, "For Ethan, when the time comes, he'll know." His world tilted. The baby wasn't Lily. It wasn't him as a child. It was someone else entirely. And whoever that baby was, it was the reason the Davenports were willing to kill to keep their secret buried. The road wound along the cliffs like a ribbon of danger, the Pacific crashing below in endless fury. Ethan drove in silence, the Polaroid trembling in his hands. For Ethan, when the time comes, he'll know. He couldn't take his eyes off the baby in the photograph, wrapped in blue, eyes barely open. The handwriting, shaky but precise, was unmistakably Eleanor's. Claire sat beside him, studying his expression. "Who do you think the child is?" she asked softly. Ethan swallowed hard. "At first I thought, maybe it was me. But the date on the back, June 1974, that's 5 years before I was born." Claire frowned. "Then why would she write for Ethan?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The question hung between them like smoke. They reached a rundown motel off Highway 101. Inside, the walls reeked of salt and mildew. Claire spread the files across the bed while Ethan sat at the edge, staring at the Polaroid as though it might speak. She pointed to one of the documents. "Look here. This Project Sequoia, it's tied to a genetic research division under Davenport Industries. It was shut down in the late 70s after a whistleblower leaked internal memos to the press, but the story disappeared. No records, no follow-up." Ethan leaned forward. "You think Eleanor was the whistleblower?" "I think she discovered what they were experimenting with." Claire hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "There are references to selective inheritance trials, artificial lineage mapping. It sounds like they were manipulating bloodlines, creating genetic profiles to link or erase family ties." Ethan felt the floor drop beneath him. "You mean they were rewriting people's DNA records?" Claire nodded. "Or rewriting who they belonged to." He stood pacing. "My father, Eleanor, that baby. It's all connected. She wasn't just running from the Davenports, she was running from what they made." Then, as if on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed. Unknown number again. A single text appeared. "Ready to trade?" Attached was a photo. Lily, tied to a chair, blindfolded, terrified. Ethan's stomach turned to ice. Below the image, coordinates. A location in the hills north of Malibu. Claire grabbed his arm. "Ethan, wait. You can't just walk into it." He was already moving toward the door. "I don't care what it takes. I'm getting her back." She followed him, pleading. "If you go alone, they'll kill you both. You need leverage." Ethan stopped, eyes burning. "I have it." He held up the photograph. "They don't want this Polaroid because of Eleanor. They want it because of what it proves. That baby, whoever it is, destroys their story." They reached the rendezvous point by twilight, an abandoned vineyard swallowed by fog. Ethan parked at the edge of the property. "Stay here," he told Claire. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, drive to the FBI field office in Ventura. Give them everything." She shook her head. "Ethan," but he was already walking into the mist. At the center of the vineyard stood a rusted greenhouse. Inside, shadows moved. Then a voice. Calm, deliberate, familiar. "Mr. Cole, you've caused us quite a mess." Charles Davenport stepped into the light, older now but unmistakably powerful. His eyes gleamed with the kind of confidence that came from owning everything, even the truth. Lily sat bound to a chair behind him, trembling but alive. Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. "Let her go." Davenport smiled. "I will. Once you hand me the photograph." Ethan held it up, trembling with rage. "Tell me what she was to you. Who's the child?" Davenport sighed, almost tenderly. "That's the tragedy, isn't it? Eleanor was brilliant, but unstable. She couldn't accept what we were trying to build. Your father understood. He helped us continue her work." Ethan's heart hammered. "My father hated you." Davenport's smile widened. He hated himself. Because the boy Eleanor bore, the one in that photograph, wasn't hers. He stepped closer. "He was yours." The words hit like a physical blow. Ethan's breath stopped. Davenport's voice dropped to a whisper. "She gave you up, mister. Cole, your father hid the truth to protect you. And now you've brought the past back from the grave." Behind them, glass shattered. Claire burst through the door with a fire extinguisher, slamming it into the nearest guard. Chaos erupted. Ethan lunged toward Lily, cutting her ropes with shaking hands. Davenport shouted, "Stop them!" But it was too late. Ethan, Lily, and Claire bolted through the broken frame into the fog. Gunfire chased them as they dove into the car. As the vineyard disappeared behind them, Ethan's pulse thundered. Davenport's words echoed in his head. "The boy in the photograph was yours." If that was true, then the mystery wasn't about Eleanor anymore. It was about him, and he was running out of time to discover what kind of man he really was. The road ahead was a blur of headlights and panic. Lily sat in the back seat, shivering beneath a blanket, her small voice barely audible. "Daddy, who were those men?" Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Every word he might have said was tangled in fear and disbelief. Davenport's voice still echoed in his mind. "The boy Eleanor bore wasn't hers. He was yours." Beside him, Claire was silent, clutching her side where a shard of glass had cut through her jacket. The smell of gunpowder still clung to her hair. "Ethan," she said softly, "if what Davenport said is true, then you're connected to Eleanor in ways you don't understand. The experiment, the genetic project, maybe it wasn't about money or politics. Maybe it was about you." Ethan gripped the wheel tighter, jaw clenched. "Then we end this. Tonight." They stopped at a deserted rest area on the edge of Topanga Canyon. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. Claire leaned against the hood, patching her wound with duct tape and gauze. Ethan pulled out the files from the glove compartment, spreading them under the dome light. One of them, Project Sequoia Phase 2, had a list of test subjects. His eyes caught on a line marked Subject 07A, male, infant. Genetic father, M. Cole. Donor sequence, E. Davenport. He read it twice, then again. It didn't make sense, and yet it made perfect sense. His father, Michael Cole, hadn't protected Eleanor from the Davenports. He had protected the child they created together, the product of a secret genetic trial meant to merge bloodlines, to forge loyalty through DNA. The child was him, Ethan Cole. His entire life, the missing memories, the unexplained wealth his father once hid, the reason Eleanor had whispered his name that night on the freeway. It all fell into place like a cruel joke written by fate. He was the experiment. Claire watched his face change. Grief, anger, horror, all colliding in silence. "Ethan," she whispered, "you need to hear something." She pulled out a small recorder, pressing play. A familiar voice crackled through static, frail, trembling but unmistakably Eleanor Davenport. "If you're listening to this, you've found the truth. They made you from us, Ethan, from me and Michael. Not born of love, but of ambition. They wanted an heir they could control. But Michael couldn't let them have you. He stole you from their lab the night the boat sank. That's why he died. That's why they came for me. Forgive me, my son. I only wanted you to live free." The recording ended. The storm outside roared like applause for the dead. Ethan's throat burned. "She was my mother." Claire nodded. "And Davenport, he's the one who ordered the program. He's the reason your father's gone. You're the last thread left." Before he could speak, Headlights flared in the distance. Black SUVs barreled toward the rest stop. Ethan stuffed the files into Claire's hands. "Take Lily. Get her to safety." "No," Claire snapped. "We do this together." He shook his head. "They want me, not you. End this story if I don't make it out." She hesitated, then kissed his cheek. "You better make it out." The first SUV skidded to a stop. Armed men poured out, fanning across the lot. In the middle stepped Charles Davenport, immaculate even in the storm. "Ethan," he called, voice echoing through the thunder. "You can't run from your own blood." Ethan stepped into the rain, unarmed, soaked, defiant. "I'm not running." Davenport's eyes narrowed. "Then you know the truth. You belong to me." "No," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. "I belong to the people you destroyed, to my father, to my mother." He tossed the flash drive at Davenport's feet. "Everything you buried, the files, the proof, it's already online. Every secret you ever kept." Davenport froze. "You're bluffing." Ethan smiled bitterly. "Try me." Behind him, sirens wailed, distant but growing louder. Claire had done it. She'd sent everything. Davenport raised his gun, desperation cracking through his perfect composure. "You think this ends with me?" Ethan took a step closer. "No, it ends with us." A shot rang out, not from Davenport but from the ridge. A sniper's bullet tore through Davenport's chest, sending him collapsing into the mud. Chaos erupted. Guards scattered, sirens screamed, and Ethan stood frozen as the rain washed away decades of lies. Claire's car screeched to a halt beside him, Lily crying from the back seat. "Ethan!" He climbed in, drenched, trembling, alive. As they sped into the night, the city lights flickering ahead, Ethan finally exhaled. The truth had cost him everything, but for the first time in his life, he knew who he was. The sun rose over Los Angeles like a wound that refused to close. The city stirred as if nothing had happened, as if a man hadn't just torn open the secrets of one of its oldest dynasties. But for Ethan Cole, nothing looked the same. The air felt sharper, the light heavier. Every truth he had uncovered pressed against him like the weight of another life. He sat on a park bench overlooking the skyline, Lily asleep beside him, her head resting against his shoulder. Her breathing was soft and steady, the rhythm that had pulled him back from the edge every time the darkness tried to claim him. Across from him, Claire sipped burnt coffee, eyes fixed on her phone. "It's everywhere," she said quietly. "The files, the recordings, the financial ledgers, all over the news. Davenport Holdings is finished. The FBI raided the Haven facility an hour ago. They're calling it the biggest corporate cover-up in California history." Ethan didn't answer. He watched a pair of sparrows hop along the curb, oblivious to the chaos unfolding around them. "My father died to keep me free," he said finally. "And Eleanor, she gave up everything just to make sure I existed. I spent my whole life thinking I was nobody, and now I find out I was the secret they tried to erase." Claire set down her cup. "You're not their experiment anymore, Ethan. You're proof that what they built couldn't last. You survived." He looked at her, the morning sun reflecting in his tired eyes. "Survival isn't the same as living." She smiled faintly. "Then start living." For her. She nodded toward Lily. Later that day, the three of them drove to the coast, the same stretch of highway where it had all begun. The freeway shimmered in the heat, the Pacific glittering beyond the guardrail. Ethan pulled over at the same spot where he'd first seen the broken-down car, where an old woman with trembling hands had changed his life. He walked to the edge of the road, holding Eleanor's locket, the one the agents had tried to steal. He'd found it again at the burned-out ruins of his house, blackened but unbroken. Inside was the tiny photograph of Eleanor and Charles, with his father's face blurred in the background. The image that had started it all. He whispered to the wind, "You're free now, Mom." "So am I." Then he opened the locket and let it fall into the waves below. That night, news anchors filled every screen in America. Words like conspiracy, genetic engineering, and corporate crime dominated the headlines. Anonymous sources linked the scandal to decades of disappearances and falsified records. The world was finally seeing the truth, but none of them would ever know the boy at the center of it, the one who'd been born a secret and became his own reckoning. In a small motel room outside San Diego, Ethan tucked Lily into bed. She looked up at him sleepily. "Daddy, is the bad man gone?" He brushed her hair from her eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart. He's gone." She smiled, drifting into sleep. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the quiet settle not as fear but as peace. At dawn, he stood on the balcony, the Pacific breathing against the shore. Claire joined him, a folder in her hands. "The Bureau wants your statement," she said. "They'll give you a new identity if you want it." He shook his head. "No more hiding. My name's Ethan Cole. It's time people knew that name for the right reasons." She smiled. "What will you do now?" He looked at the horizon, the light spilling gold across the ocean. "I'll raise my daughter. I'll build something honest. And maybe I'll tell this story someday." "Would anyone believe it?" Claire asked. Ethan's gaze stayed fixed on the sea. "They don't have to. Some stories aren't meant to be believed, just remembered." As the camera of fate pulled back, the freeway stretching endlessly, the morning wind carrying echoes of the past, one truth remained. A single act of kindness had changed the course of generations. A stranger's rescue had become a revelation, and a man who once stopped for an old woman on the side of the road had, without knowing it, saved himself.